Aloha, and welcome to another edition of Congressman Ed Case Reports, my monthly show to share with you my activities as your congressman. Today, as you can see, I'm coming to you from the United States Capitol on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Of course, this is where my responsibilities are. My responsibilities as a member of Congress to deliberate and to vote on the great issues of our day for our country. Today, what I want to do is try to share with you some of what a day is like for me in Washington, D.C. If you add up the entire year, I sometimes calculate that I am in Washington or somewhere else in our country or in our world, maybe 6 to 7 months of the year. About 4 months of the year, 5 months of the year, I'm back in Hawaii working with you. 1 month of the year, I'm on a plane. But today, let's talk about Washington. And what I want to share with you is my activities throughout the day, because when I'm in Washington, D.C., almost all of my activities are right here on Capitol Hill within a very short radius of where we are. Of course, in the United States Capitol, which is where the U.S. House chamber is, and then right in front of me over here, the 3 House office buildings where my office is and where our committees are and where many of our activities are. And then on occasion, I go downtown Washington, D.C. to speak with groups, which I did in this segment. So I hope you enjoyed today as I kind of take you through my office, my committees, a speech that I gave downtown to a hotel and a visitor industry group, and various other aspects of kind of how my day goes here. So I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to my congressional office, 2443 Rayburn House Office Building. Every member of Congress has his or her own individual office in one of our 3 House office buildings. I'm in Rayburn, named after the legendary Speaker Sam Rayburn of Texas, who was actually instrumental in Hawaii becoming a state. Here I do most of my work, of course, with my staff. Here is where we greet our constituents when they come to visit. We welcome you to come and take tours out of our office. We welcome you to come and meet with us here. And of course, here I do my hardcore legislative work in the office itself. And from here, I will also go out to the committees that I work on and to other activities, and of course to the floor of the House, which is, as I'm going to say later in this show, about 7 minutes away. E komo mai. How's it?
Welcome back, Congressman.
Thank you. Let's want to pause here. This is something that I put together that I see whenever I come into the office, and also the folks that come in to visit me see right away. And these are the members of Congress from Hawaii who have held my seat since statehood, and they are some legendary people in the course of Hawaii politics. Of course, starting with Daniel Inouye. Most people of course, know him rightly as our U.S. Senator for many decades, but he started in the United States House. He was the first member of Congress in the House side from Hawaii after statehood. And then Thomas Gill followed him, and my own mentor, Spark Matsunaga, who I worked for here, Patsy Mink, Cecil Heftel, Neil Abercrombie, Patricia Psyche, Charles DeJoux, Colleen Hanabusa, Mark Takai, and now it is my turn. And I have this here to make the statement that this office is not held by any one person from Hawaii. This office is held by the people of Hawaii, and those of us that have been honored to serve here come in as stewards of that office for the time that we're here. But the office goes on, and it will go on after I'm no longer on it. This is my entryway here. This is where we welcome people, and you know, sometimes people are surprised that the office is not bigger. I think it's fine. It certainly serves my purposes, but you'll see that we've got a number of people working very hard, but in pretty cramped quarters, except for my office. So let's go check out my office. Welcome to my home away from home, my office in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill in the Rayburn building. Some people are surprised at my desk. They think it should be somehow bigger. You know, you're kind of used to those ideas, these huge, massive desks, and I don't need a huge, massive desk. I just need enough to sit there and get my work done and talk with my staff. And the reason I do that in part is because I don't need a big desk, but also I'm trying to save all of my room for this, which is where I do my most important work, which is meeting with you. So this is where I meet with my constituents, meet with larger staff meetings, and meet with the folks that I want to meet with and want to meet with me. So come on in and we'll just take a quick tour around the office. My meeting area, my desk, and where I work, and then kind of over here, bookcases, and I'm filling them up with mementos of my service here. So you'll see over here, for example, we've got many of the medallions that the military and others give out. I'm starting to have quite a collection from all of the work that I've done with them, and then kind of the reminders for me of home. I've got my outrigger canoes to indicate the voyages that we're on. I've got something that's sentimental for me from my Big Island home, which is some sand and opihi shells from South Kona. I've got my daruma here. I've got my gavel from when I served in the state legislature back in Hawaii. And then this is my newest treasure. This rock comes from Waikele Elementary School. I visited them just a few weeks ago, and they have a rock garden, and they will give you a rock. And so you take the rock with it. This one says you can rock it. And you take it with you wherever you are, and you report back from time to time on where you've taken it. But when you're finished with it, you return it to the rock garden at Waikele, which I will do after I'm finished serving in Congress. Beautiful flowers here, courtesy of some agricultural folks from the Big Island. I just had a meeting here about 2 days ago with our incredible next generation of agricultural leaders in Hawaii to talk about how we can help Hawaii agriculture, and they kindly brought me some flowers. And then this is for anybody that wants to come in. Mauna Loa macadamia nuts and other goodies for people that feel like a taste of home. We also have here some kind of indications of some of the things that we do for folks when they come visiting from Hawaii. This is Finding Hawaii in DC, kind of where you can find monuments and other things that relate to Hawaii and DC. Excursions in Hawaii, because after all, one of my jobs here is to serve as a chief travel agent for my colleagues and others who want to visit Hawaii. So I try to give them good suggestions. How we can assist you with your concerns, and of course, how we can assist you with your trips to the United States Capitol. We're happy to give tours to you if you come to visit, and we're happy to kind of set you up with other things to do in Washington, D.C. Here's my Chief of Staff's office. As you can see, the staff is hard at work here. Really good to see you there. Tim Nelson, Connor Smith doing the work. And now we go back to, I don't know what this room is affectionately known as, but this is the staff's quarters back here. How's everybody doing today?
Hello.
Hello, how's everybody? Okay, we won't talk about all the work that needs to be done. And they asked me if they needed to clean this up before I took this shot, and I said, no way. I mean, this is how it is. This is kind of their domain back here. But as you can tell, it takes a lot of dedication to work in a congressional office. They work in pretty small quarters, but do a great job. And that's it for my office. We'll show you on this show a couple of examples of what we do here in the office, as well as elsewhere in the Capitol and on Capitol Hill. Aloha. How are you all today? Hi, aloha. Good to see you. Ed, nice to see you. Aloha. How's everything going?
Very good.
You here to take a tour of the Capitol?
Oh yeah.
Yes, we are.
Oh, excellent. You been to DC before?
I have once.
Oh, really? Have you been to the Capitol?
I have.
Okay,
Yes.
a long time ago.
Yeah, it was like 2010.
Okay, all right. We're going to give you a better tour this time.
All right. Looking forward.
You want to come in for a little while and sit down? I got a few moments. It used to be called the August recess, and then everybody, some smart PR person said, well, that sounds like you're playing in the sandbox or something like that. So now it's called an August district work period. I had about 75 meetings, events, speeches, whatever, in 4 weeks. So I got a lot done. It was very productive. I will often speak on the floor of the House, either during time for members to address whatever issue they want or to offer amendments to bills that are on the floor. Here's a tape of my amendment a couple of months back to the Climate Change Now Bill, H.R. 8, our major climate change initiative in the House, in which I amended the bill successfully to indicate that the oceans have to be a priority in terms of our climate change debate.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Hawaii.
Madam Chair, I rise in support of my amendment to H.R. 9, which would recognize the importance of the oceans to our global climate system and the international efforts underway to include our oceans in nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, under the Paris Agreement. When we talk about the impacts of man-made climate change, we focus on the worlds of our lands and air, but we tend to forget the largest world of all, our oceans. Yet some of the foremost negative consequences of climate change, as well as the positive vital processes that have kept our climate on an even keel until recently and can continue to do so, lie in the ocean. We cannot forget the oceans. No climate change solutions can work if our oceans are not in the room. The ocean covers more than 70% of the Earth and directly affects weather around the globe. The temperature and currents of the ocean determine storm patterns and strength. We have seen increases in measures of intensity, frequency, and duration, as well as the number of the strongest Category 4 and 5 storms since the 1980s. The ocean also absorbs many of the most immediate consequences of carbon pollution, buffering us from some of its most damaging impacts. The ocean has absorbed 93% of the total excess heat energy taken up by greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. Additionally, the ocean is the largest sink for anthropogenic carbon dioxide, or CO2, absorbing roughly 1/3 of CO2 emissions. The increase in temperature and carbon in the atmosphere and oceans are directly impacting communities throughout the world. According to the 2018 Fourth National Climate Assessment, or NCA, released by the U.S. Global Change Research Program, made up of 13 federal agencies, and I quote, "Human-caused carbon emissions influence ocean ecosystems through 3 main processes: ocean warming, acidification, and deoxygenation." Additionally, the NCA states that, quote, "The social, economic, and environmental systems along the coast are being affected by climate change. Threats from sea level rise are exacerbated by dynamic processes such as high tide and storm surge, erosion, waves and their effects, saltwater intrusion into coastal aquifers and elevated groundwater, local rainfall, river runoff, increasing water and surface air temperatures, and acidification." In just one compelling instances of many from around the world, my state of Hawaii's oceans and coastlines are on the front lines of dealing with the impacts of climate change in our oceans and coasts. For example, the Honolulu tide gauge, a constant over a century now, has measured a sea level rise of nearly 1/2 foot since 1905. Over 70% of our beaches in Hawaii are in a state of chronic erosion, likely caused by a combination of shoreline hardening and ongoing sea level rise. The frequency of high tide flooding in Honolulu since the 1960s has increased from 6 days per year to 11 per year. And we have also seen in Hawaii sea level rise impact traditional and customary practices, including fish pond maintenance, cultivation of salt, and gathering from the nearshore fishery. About 550 cultural sites, 38 miles of major roads, and more than $19 billion in assets will be vulnerable to chronic flooding resulting from a 3.2-foot increase in sea level. Such widespread flooding will change the character of the islands by affecting cultural heritage and daily commerce and lifestyle, and this is chronic throughout the entire Pacific. We also in Hawaii face just one example of the impacts of ocean warming acidification on our reefs. We've seen globally average sea surface temperature increase by 1.8% Fahrenheit over the past 100 years. We've seen over nearly 30 years of oceanic pH measurements based on data collected from Station Aloha, Hawaii, show a roughly 8.7% increase in ocean acidity over this time. We've seen increased ocean acidification reduce the ability of marine organisms to build shells and other hard structures, adversely impacting coral reefs and threatening marine ecosystems. And we have seen extended periods of coral bleaching, which did not even occur first until 2014, but now are becoming much longer. This is again true throughout the entire Pacific Ocean, and we are not alone, because the ocean is interconnected throughout our world, and we are a clear example of what the world is facing. These impacts are happening all over the world in our country. 39 countries, conspicuously not including the U.S., have embraced the challenges and promise of our oceans in facing climate change by signing the Because the Ocean Initiative, which has encouraged progress on the incorporation of the ocean in climate change policy debate, with a special focus on the inclusion of ocean action into nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. The efforts of these countries and their partners will be invaluable as we face the crisis of climate change. A lot of the work of Congress, of course, is done in our offices and our committees and off of the floor of the House, which is where the legislation of the House is considered. I keep in touch with what's going on the floor of the House in a number of different ways. I can keep in touch off of my phone, but as I'm in my office here, I can watch the proceedings on my TV here. What's happening today as we shoot this is a debate over the protection of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in the North Slope of Alaska. And we've got a full debate going on the bill right now. And what has happened is we're about to move into amendments on the bill right now, which you'll see. Later on, after the amendments are finished on this particular bill, the vote will be called, and I will then go from here to the floor of the House to vote, and I'll hopefully be able to show you what it looks like when the vote is called as the vote is being tallied, the time remaining. Okay, all of the debate on those amendments and on the full bill have now been taken, and the vote has been called. Every vote has a 15-minute advance notice to get to the floor to vote, and you can see here that time is counting down. We're now at about 10 minutes. There's the bell for the 10-minute vote. We have both this on the TV as well as a system of bells and lights that tell us what is going on. And you can also see the running total of the vote, and you can see that there's not that many people on the floor of the House quite yet, and that's because everybody's like me. They have been watching the debate in their office. They have now been called to the vote, and another 5 or 4 or 3 minutes, the floor will be full while everybody votes. Now, I know that it takes me 7 minutes to walk from my office to the floor to vote. So sometimes I'll take that down to 7 minutes, and then I'll leave very fast. I think today I'm going to go over there a little bit early because, frankly, going to the floor is a really good opportunity for me to connect with my colleagues and talk about legislation or just check up on what everybody's been doing and stay in touch. So time to vote. On occasion, I'll also appear before committees of Congress to speak to matters that I believe are of particular importance. These occur on Member Day, when members do go to committees to indicate their priorities. Here's me speaking to the House Armed Services Committee on Members Day, indicating the importance of the Indo-Pacific region, our backyard, in terms of our overall strategy, especially when it comes to national defense. Chair Smith, Ranking Member Thornberry, distinguished members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to testify today on this year's National Defense Authorization Act. And I do so representing Hawaii, a proud partner in the Indo-Pacific. And to put this in perspective, if you get on a plane today and fly to Hawaii, that's 5,000 miles. If you get on a plane then and fly from Hawaii to Beijing, that's another 5,000 miles. So that will give you a sense of the not only the distances we're talking about in the Indo-Pacific, but the placement of Hawaii. So in Hawaii, we live and breathe the Pacific, always have and always will. The National Security Strategy and National Defense Strategy affirmed the reemergence of long-term strategic competition with other great powers as a central challenge to our national security. I think most of us can now agree that no country poses as significant a long-term challenge and threat to us as does China. Thus, the NDAA, as our annual blueprint for the Department of Defense and our military, should reflect the strategic interests of the U.S. has in the Indo-Pacific region generally and China specifically. Our goal, as summarized by this administration's free and open Indo-Pacific strategy, with which I generally agree, is to peacefully address China's rise and bring it into the existing regional architecture of free and open navigation, interconnected trade and development, security cooperation, and international institutions. The purpose of a strong military posture in the Indo-Pacific is not to seek conflict or escalate competition with China, but to raise the costs and international consequences of Chinese aggression and reassure allies and partners of our engagement in this critical region. U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, INDOPACOM, headquartered in Hawaii, is charged with addressing our military challenges in the Indo-Pacific. It is the largest combatant command in terms of area of responsibility and assets, stretching from the west coast of the United States mainland to the west coast of India. But it requires additional resources. Reports of forces in the region being overworked from high demand and struggling with readiness from deferred maintenance are simply unacceptable. This year's NDAA should continue a long-term strategy for INDOPACOM to reach its goals in deployed forces and readiness, especially in air and naval assets. We need to continue supporting improvements in doctrine, assets, and technology to counter China's aggressive military and soft power buildup. I urge the committee to continue investing in research and development of these technologies to address these risks. Hawaii is of particular importance to our Indo-Pacific strategy. Hawaii offers an indispensable forward position in the Pacific, is home to INDOPACOM headquarters and commands for every service, and maintains a large military presence. We need increased investment in our military construction needs there, including the Hawaii Infrastructure Readiness Initiative, our shipyard, and training ranges to improve our readiness in the Indo-Pacific. Even with increased investment in improving our military posture in the Indo-Pacific, the U.S. cannot go it alone in the region. Peacefully integrating China into the existing rules-based regional order requires the active cooperation of partner countries. The vast geographic space that needs to be covered in the Indo-Pacific demands reliance on our allies there. We need to reassure our traditional treaty allies, such as Japan, South Korea, Australia, the Philippines, and Thailand, while building relationships with partners and potential partners like India and Vietnam. I also want to ask that this committee pay special attention to the Pacific Island countries such as Vanuatu, the Federated States of Micronesia, and Palau, to name only a few. They are critical to our overall posture in the Pacific and simply need much more attention from both a military and a State Department foreign aid perspective for our overall strategy. In conclusion, I urge this committee to ensure this year's NDAA reflects the strategic importance of Hawaii and the entire Indo-Pacific. We must enhance our military posture there and continue building alliances and partnerships in the region. Thank you for your consideration and hard work in advancing our country's national security.
Thank you.
Good morning. Aloha. Thank you so much for having me here today. I love that introduction music. I've never had it before, so I really appreciate that, whoever did the music intro. And for all of you, welcome to Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and visit your Congress, to express to your Congress the issues of importance to you and our industry. I especially want to thank CHIP and AHLA and AAHOA for putting this together to bring you here to advocate for policies that are important to us and to provide you with the tools that you will need when you go and meet with your members of Congress, hopefully later today and tomorrow, and by the way, back in the district as well. We all know how important tourism in the visitor industry is to our our circles, our businesses, our communities, and to many, many states throughout this country, it is the industry. Hawaii is one of them. In Hawaii, as many of you I'm sure know, tourism has been for 2 generations now our #1 industry, our #1 employer, our #1 economic generator, and it's going to continue to be that into the future, and that is true of many communities throughout our country. However, for many communities, although it is not the #1 industry, it is certainly a critical industry that can and will contribute to local economies and state economies across our country because of the breadth and depth of tourism. The old tourism model is really in many ways tossed out the window, and people are looking for those new experiences. People are looking for those unique experiences, and every community throughout our country has something to offer that a visitor would want to experience. And so I think we all know of the importance of what we are talking about here. And I want to focus with you just for a few minutes on one of the most pressing issues for our industry here in Washington, D.C., telecommunications law. And you might be saying to yourself, what does telecommunications law have to do at all with our industry? Well, it comes down to the Communications Decency Act, which was an act that was actually passed many, many decades ago, and it was designed to do exactly what you hear in the title, which was to apply some boundaries to public speech, honoring the First Amendment, but some requirements of what was not appropriate within constitutional protections to be same. And then, of course, the internet came along, and all of those communications were magnified a million times. And so in 1996, Congress amended this Communications Decency Act and added Section 230. And Section 230 essentially says this. It says that if you are operating an internet platform, if you are running the internet, and somebody posts something online that is objectionable, is libelous, you are not liable for that. And the reason for that was pretty clear. We wanted to foster the internet. We wanted to foster free speech. We wanted to assign risk, and we didn't want to shut down the internet platforms as they grew. Fair enough. Now let's fast forward into the issue that we are now talking about, which is, by the way, occurring at a time when we are in Congress looking at the Communications Decency Act, Section 230, in a whole range of issues, because on a whole range of issues now, Section 230 has been used, as it is in this situation, as a shield against liability for actions on the internet platform. For example, last year, and I mean no comparison, because there is no comparison between these two situations, ours and the one I will describe, but last year what Congress did was to amend Section 230 to say that sex trafficking on the internet that was marketed through the internet platforms could not, what was liable, was actionable against the internet platforms themselves if they knew it was happening. Obviously that's illegal. Some internet platforms, believe it or not, used 230 as a shield against advertising sex trafficking on their platforms. And Congress said, no, that's not right. So the question is, well, what other areas are not right when you know something is illegal? And that's the question that we have here today. And of course, as we take a look at the vacation rental industry across our country, the Airbnbs, the VRBOs, the flip keys of our modern day world, we know that the model that they pursue is a model of advertising through the internet. So vacation rentals across our country, as is the case with, of course, hotel rooms, we all know this, get to market increasingly off the internet. The old, advertise it in the paper and on TV, yeah, it has a place for that, but it's the internet that is carrying the modern day advertising. And so vacation rentals operating throughout our country can only get to market through the internet, and conversely, if the internet does not exist for them to get to market, then they do not succeed. And we know also that throughout our country, vacation rentals have positive impacts in many, many communities, and some communities choose to allow this model even though it does have negative impacts on communities. Many communities, however, Hawaii being one of them, and many of yours as well, I'm sure, have taken a look at this model and have said, no, this is not consistent with the way we want to run our state, the way we want to run our county, the way we want to run our neighborhood. We have said, as we have in Hawaii, no, this model doesn't work on a number of levels. One level that doesn't work on is a straight compliance with the law model as opposed to hotels, because hotels all comply with the law. The hotels in Hawaii comply with law that is very specific to hotel room taxes, regulations governing the operation of the hotel, worker safety, occupational safety across the board. And so if you've got a whole model out there that is essentially not complying with that law, then you've got a disproportionate advantage created because you are operating outside of legal bounds. So one issue is just the direct comparison between hotels and illegal vacation rentals who are not complying with hotel law. So that's one negative impact. Another negative impact is the fact that virtually all local neighborhoods across the country have planning and zoning laws that basically protect certain uses in certain areas. And certainly residential communities throughout the country, for the most part, are residential. So in other words, I can't go running a huge coal mining facility in the middle of a residential neighborhood somewhere if it's not zoned for coal mining. I can't go out there and run a business there. I am not supposed to be able to go out there and run a hotel in a residential community in Hawaii. And so if there is a model out there that we want to say protects our communities, protects our sense of residential neighborhoods, where I can leave my work at the end of the day and go home and hang with my neighbors and have some peace and quiet, then I should be able to do that. That's a judgment that most state and local communities make. And yet, if I go home to my residential community at night and I'm surrounded by hotels, then I have lost that sense of my residential community. And that is a negative consequence of higher utilization of vacation rentals. A third area where this really is driven is in housing availability and prices, residential housing. Now, if I have a house and it's valued as a residence, and if I use a cash flow model, if you want to do it that way, if it's valued on its rental income as a residence, and then I turn that house into a hotel, what happens to the price? The price jacks up. The price jacks up because it is more valuable as a hotel room than it is as a house. And as a result, it is taken out of the residential market. There are less residential units available for housing, either by owners or by renters, and the price goes up. That has happened in Hawaii. And so we have a number of negative impacts from vacation rentals. We have the non-compliance with hotel-related law, loss of residential communities, we have housing price impacts, there's several other impacts. Now, many communities throughout our country have taken action on this. Hawaii is just one of them. And in Hawaii, we, for example, passed legislation in 2016 which would require operators posting on rental platforms to list their legal tax identification numbers and platforms advertising which does not contain such numbers. So in other words, what we said in Hawaii was, no, we are having too many vacation rentals that are operating illegally, and we have no enforcement mechanism to attack these illegal vacation rentals. To get a sense of the scale of what I'm talking about in Hawaii, some years ago there was an attempt to quantify the number of vacation rentals. The quantification was somewhere around 23,000, widely regarded as being low to the number, probably more like 30 to 40,000. 30 to 40,000 throughout Hawaii. Now, since we only have about 50, something like that, 1,000 hotel rooms in Hawaii, you can see that it's a major contributor with a legal hotel industry in Hawaii, number one. And number two, we know, because we know what our laws say, and we know who is registered, we have legal vacation rentals allowed for bed and breakfast and that kind of stuff, but they're limited. We know that number's only in the couple thousand. So we know there's tens of thousands of illegal vacation rentals in Hawaii, and the state legislature and our governor said that's wrong. This was with AHLA's help. That's wrong. We're going to go at this in two ways. The first way we're going to go at it is we're going to go at it by saying that operators and owners, when you post on a vacation rental site, an online platform, you have to list the tax ID number. Now that's tantamount to saying you have to demonstrate legality. Okay, and number two, the platforms, you cannot take that advertisement unless there is proof of legality. through a tax ID number, and if you don't have that, you can't list it, and if you list it, you are liable. You are liable. A comparable law was just passed by the city and county of Honolulu. Now, the Airbnbs of the world have come along and they've said, well, by the way, remember that little telecommunications law that was passed decades and decades ago and was modified in 1996? It says I'm not liable. And so as a result, what they've done is they have sued across the country. They have sued against any attempt to enforce state and local laws in this area by saying I cannot be held liable for what is posted on my online platform, even if it is illegal, even if I know it is illegal. Now, I think we would all agree that if an online platform, or any business for that matter, was operating illegally, was fostering illegal activity, was making a profit, a huge profit, off of this, that would be wrong, that there would be something inconsistent in that, and that we would ask questions about that law. So, and in fact, this has been a challenge by your industry in the courts across the country, which some courts have actually said, most recently in California, in Santa Monica. So Santa Monica did do one thing right. They actually passed a very, very strong vacation rental law. It basically said, no, we agree, the Communications Decency Act cannot be interpreted that way. However, courts only interpret the law. And we don't know where this is going to go with the courts. And so the best thing to do here is to amend the law, which is exactly what my bill, the Protecting Local Authority in Neighborhoods Act, does. And it's a very, very simple law. All it says is essentially, you can't post and get away with it. You don't have that loophole anymore. That's all it says. So it does not make a judgment about whether vacation rentals throughout our country should be legal or illegal. That's up to state and local jurisdictions. If they want to legalize all of them, fine. That's a judgment. If they want to provide that every single one of them is illegal, that's a judgment. If they want to do a little bit of a hybrid, which is what Hawaii has done, to allow them in certain situations, in certain areas, in certain numbers, that's fine too. But as a matter of federal law, the online platforms, who are the people that are benefiting the most from vacation rentals of the legal or illegal variety, should not be able to stop that exercise of state and local jurisdiction. And so I introduced the Plan Act just recently. I'm very, very happy that my co-introducers are bipartisan. I have Congressman Peter King of New York, Ralph Norman of South Carolina, and Raja Krishnamurthy of Illinois. Now, maybe each of them has a different reason for joining me on the introduction, but I think the core of everybody's reasoning is this is an inappropriate use of the Communications Decency Act. Excuse me. So where do you come in? You need to go out and advocate for the Plan Act because this is hurting the hotel industry, the legal hotel industry, as we say, the legal hotel and lodging industry. This is hurting not just the industry, it is hurting people in the industry. As Chip already noted, these are stories that need to be told. The industry and its millions and millions and millions of employees across the country are being hurt because of this particular loophole. And that story can be told, and I'll give you some just advice from a receiving communication member of Congress. Couple of tips. First of all, I listen to all kinds of people across our country on all kinds of issues. But the people that I listen to the most are the people I represent. Because I represent them, I am their only U.S. Congressman. And if they come into my office, if they contact me, if they want to talk about an issue, well, I better darn listen to them. And I think most members of Congress feel very strongly along those lines. So number one, direct communication with your member of Congress is the way to go here. And that's why I believe you're all kind of doing a go to the Hill and split up and see your members of Congress job today and tomorrow. And by the way, let's not only talk about the Hill, because I'm back in the district a whole bunch and available to meet with folks. So you can easily ask me to come down, me as a representative of us representatives, me to come down to your business, come down to your shift change, come down to your workplace. Come down and talk about this issue with me in the district on a real-time basis in a real-life situation. That works very well too. So direct communication with your congressman is the way to go here. Number two, try to understand as much as, well, number two, be prepared. So go into your meeting knowing what you want to say, knowing what the problem is as you see it, relating that problem back to the district as much as you can. This impacts Waikiki and the 100,000 people that work there because of this, right? That's the way to go on this. Number two is related to very specific things. Be prepared. Related to direct local conditions as much as you can. Anticipate questions as much as you can. So that takes a little bit of basic research. Nothing fancy here, just presentation skills, just defense skills, just advocacy skills. And then number three, try to, if you can, figure out what drives that member of Congress. For example, on this particular bill, I've mentioned a couple of consequences already. A member of Congress may be driven because he or she has ties to the hotel and visitor industry, as do I. I mean, I worked in the hotel and visitor industry for 5 years, and I represented it for decades as a private attorney. So I know the industry to start with. I'm going to, and that's something that you should know, whether I have ties to that industry. As you know, Congressman, from your own experience, this, and this. That's one way to go. Another way to go here is housing prices. Housing prices are a huge problem in many parts of our country. So if you're from a high housing price and availability district, that's the way to go with this, because that member of Congress may be more sensitive to that argument. This is hurting us because it is taking inventory out of the housing market, driving up prices. Number three, many members of Congress are very, very sensitive to the feds telling the states and the local governments what to do. And so if you're talking to a member of Congress that believes in more state and local authority, then this is going to be music to their ears. Why should we have a federal law, an obscure federal law, never meant for this purpose, come along and supersede state and local rights and authority and ability to make a decision for us right at home? Why should DC tell us what to do? Those are three ways to approach this issue. But since I hope you're all listening to me, and I think you are, you've got your own things going on in your head right now, how you're going to formulate this argument, how you're going to best present it to your member of Congress. And then finally, the ask. Will you please co-sponsor this bill? Please co-sponsor this bill. Now, one thing to know is that co-sponsorship doesn't always mean that you are going to ultimately vote for the bill in the form that it is introduced. It can mean that, but many times a bill goes through iterations along the way. Many times a bill can account for concerns that come up throughout its development, and many times when I co-introduce a bill, co-sponsor a bill, I do have concerns, I do have questions, but I agree with the overall intent of it. And I trust that during the process, those concerns will be addressed, and I still have a call to make at the end of the day whether I'm going to vote for it or not. So it doesn't necessarily mean, yes, I'm going to do this in its present form. What it means is, do you agree with this bill, this problem, this concept, this direction enough to lend your name to this bill and say, yes, you think this is a major issue? And by the way, do you agree with it enough that you want to put your name on that bill so that you can say to your district, I did something about this issue? Because co-sponsorship and a support of a bill is doing something for your district. So a couple of practical pointers. I wish you all the very, very best. We look forward to working with you in this effort and to protect what I consider to be one of the best overall industries in our country. And I thank you very much for your participation in Washington. This is crucial. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
It is, as you just heard, very refreshing to hear a member of Congress who actually gets it, understands how it works, understands the 10th Amendment, local control. So we sincerely appreciate that. And for that, because he is such a great defender of our industry, I'd like like to present the Spirit and Hospitality Award to the Honorable Ed Case.
Oh, thank you so much.
Kind of heavy, actually.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Here. Thank you so much. A lot of my day is just walking through the Capitol doing my business. Besides the U.S. Capitol, where the House chambers are, we have 3 House office buildings, and I spend a lot of time walking between all of them, getting from my committees to the Capitol to vote and back to my office. I never actually added it up, but I probably get 3, 4, sometimes 5 miles a day walking through these corridors, and they're a real maze. So even after a lot of years in the Capitol, I still have to kind of find my way every once in a while. Much of my work in Congress is in my committees. I'm on the Appropriations Committee, which is responsible for all federal discretionary spending. And I'm also on the Committee on Natural Resources, which, as its name indicates, is responsible for all of our natural resources, our federal lands, our air, our waters. But the Interior Department, which the Natural Resources Committee watches over, is also responsible for the indigenous peoples of our country. And so I asked for and received appointment to the Subcommittee on Indigenous Peoples, which is, again, responsible for all matters from our federal government involving our indigenous peoples. And I did that primarily for our Native Hawaiian community, which I am honored to represent. Today, we're going to have a hearing of the Subcommittee on Indigenous Peoples on the fact that rates of murdered and missing indigenous women throughout our country are shockingly high compared to national norms. And so the question we have been asking the administration is, why is that and what can we do about that? And my purpose today is twofold. First, to work with my subcommittee members on this critical issue for our country, but second, to assure that the interests of Native Hawaiians as indigenous peoples of our country are also served on this committee, both generally and on this issue. Thank you, Chair. Like my colleague from Guam, I represent an indigenous population. I represent the indigenous peoples of Hawaii, the Native Hawaiians. There are well over 500,000 Native Hawaiians living in our country, of whom roughly 300,000 live in Hawaii proper. This number is obviously large, much larger than many of the federally recognized tribes. And they also suffer from many of the indicia that you have identified in your testimony, whether it be outright missing and murdered indigenous women, Native Hawaiian women, to domestic violence, to crime rates, to sexual assault, to lost loved ones. Every indicia also impacts Native Hawaiians. And I say this not only on behalf of Native Hawaiians, but on behalf of many indigenous peoples throughout our country who don't fit easily into your definitions of Indian country and tribes and reservations and all of the more structured federal, 150 years worth of law dealing with indigenous peoples. And I think that sometimes they get left out of this equation. Certainly, I know that Native Hawaiians feel that they are often treated as an afterthought by their federal government when they are indigenous peoples and when they deserve the same attention, when they have the same consequence, deserve the same attention, the same programs. And so, testimony that is Native Americans and Alaska Natives that doesn't also say Native Hawaiians is just a knee-jerk reaction from me. Why not? And I'm sure the gentleman from Guam would feel the same way. So first of all, I want to make that point because every time we talk about any issue in this subcommittee or in your work, I hope you always think about Native Hawaiians and other indigenous peoples beyond what you consider Native Americans and Alaska Natives. Number one. Number two, in that vein, have you considered or consulted with Native Hawaiian community, which is structured and represented, including the Office of Native Hawaiian Relations in the Department of the Interior, an existing office, on this particular issue? So in other words, has there been outreach? Has there been inclusion? Has there been consultation? And if not, can you do that? And we're at the House recording studio. I often tape shows and messages here to be sent back to Hawaii. If I can't be at an event, I'll send a video message. The other thing that I often do is tape my Olelo and other TV shows right here interviewing folks. Today I'm here to tape a message for the Council on Native Hawaiian Advancement for their 18th Native Hawaiian Convention. Aloha, and a heartfelt mahalo for inviting me to join the Council's 18th Annual Native Hawaiian Convention. I truly regret that I cannot be with you personally, but please know how much I appreciate your invitation and wish for you a very successful gathering. The modern movement for Native Hawaiian advancement is now almost 2 generations old and has succeeded in so many ways. Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders have striven forward across the spectrum in politics, business, education, social services, culture and the arts, and much more. Institutions from the Ali'i Trust to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, civic clubs, and more have stabilized and strengthened. Federal laws to extend the same rights and benefits to Native Hawaiians as to other indigenous peoples of the United States are now decades old. And new, bright, committed, promising generations of Native Hawaiian and Pacific Island leaders are stepping forward to chart the next course. It is, for a brief moment, cause for reflection and celebration on what is achievable and can be achieved when effort is dedicated and sustained over time, and to fully appreciate all those now gone who brought you to this critical point. But now that brief moment is past, it is time to move forward to the voyage not yet undertaken and its own challenges. For by any measure, the current state of Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders across virtually all measures is not acceptable, and there is so much still that can be done and must be done. By any measure, the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander movement is at a critical point. Not just within your own communities, but in your relationships with the other communities of Hawaii and beyond that support your progress or perhaps just don't understand. The building blocks of the past generation's successes served well, but new foundations must be built to advance to the next levels. Exactly what that next path is, what those next building blocks are, where those next advances in Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander progress in economic, political, social, and cultural strength are forged, are your decisions to make, your voyage to take. Please know that I am your committed partner, and my office is at your disposal, especially as your efforts involve our federal government. My tools include my service on the U.S. House Committee on Appropriations, from which I have secured and will continue to work for full funding of Native Hawaiian programs and full support of critical federal initiatives such as the Community Development Financial Institutions. They also include my service on the U.S. House Committee on Natural Resources and especially its Subcommittee on the Indigenous Peoples of the United States, responsible for all federal efforts relating to our country's indigenous peoples, including Native Hawaiians. But there are many other ways that we can support your further advancement, and I look forward to those next steps together. I do want to highlight 2 areas that I believe are critical to our mutual effort. The first is getting out the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander vote. There is simply no reason, no excuse for it to be among the very lowest, and it directly hinders your advancement. I hope you will make this one of your very highest priorities, not just for 2020, but systematically every election year for as long as it takes to get to the highest. The second is the 2020 census. The national census that we undertake every 10 years is critical not just to correctly identifying the number of residents of our country as required by our Constitution, but it is critical to fair and full funding of federal programs to states and to groups to include Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders. We need for Hawaii generally and for Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders to be fully counted in the 2020 census, and I hope you will make this one of your very highest priorities between now and Census Day, April 1st, 2020. I am truly excited for each and all of you for your chapters ahead and know you will have a very successful convention. And again, I truly look forward to working with you on those next chapters. I hope you enjoyed this quick glimpse into my activities day to day as your U.S. Congressman here in Washington, D.C. As always, I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to serve you and our Hawaiian Congress, and I look forward to helping you however I can. Information is on the screen about how you can contact us or find out more information about what I'm up to. Thank you again, and a hui hou.